Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the ADC tier list for 1411. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. I did a support tier list a couple of days ago, and we stream every night starting around 10:30 or 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'd love to have you. Come check it out. Okay, and if you want to support the channel further, consider taking off the ad blocker. I promise I'll never run mid-roll ads. It'll just be one or two, whatever YouTube decides at the beginning of the video. And you can also become a channel member if you're a longtime viewer and you want to help out a little bit. It's less than a quarter a day, $5 a month. That's available if you just click that membership button. Okay. So ADC, I don't think changed that much on this patch. They did a couple of nerfs. Particularly to Infinity Edge, they took it down to 40% crit modifier, but it still has that 15 AD extra that they gave it, which was the really big deal for only 100 more gold. Just kind of a crazy buff because it was already a good item. And Collector, I think, has also received a couple of nerfs. Let me see. But it's still going to be one of the best items to get first or second. So what that means is you want champions that scale really well with AD and crit. So that's champs that either have some kind of crit modifiers on their abilities, or they hit really, really hard with their abilities. So typically, most of the champs you're going to see on the tier list, and on almost any tier list about ADC, is going to be those types of champs. Now, there are some that are the on-attack champs. Ashe is kind of the odd one that we'll talk about, where you can go stuff like Kraken and the Dunavori and stuff like that. But most of the time, it's very hard-hitting, lane-dominant, scaling type of champs that are going to be really good on this patch. So, let's see if I can just see what they changed. I know the Infinity Edge. So, they nerfed Caitlyn a little bit on this one. It hasn't really mattered that much. We'll talk about Kate in a minute. The major limiting factor is just skill, especially once you start getting, below Diamond into Emerald Minus, which is most of the people that I'm targeting with this tier list. She is a bit harder to play, but if you do execute well on her, then she's still really strong. So, someone on stream the other night when we were facing a Caitlyn, they're like, man, it doesn't seem like she's nerfed at all in lane. I'm like, it's because she isn't, right? And that's the strongest part of her game is, like, her ultimate is the same, right? At least it's base damage early on, right? So you don't even have an ultimate until level 6. And then after that, the base damage is the same. It's just the scaling. So you're really only going to feel this. And this is only bonus AD. This is not including your baseline AD. So even after you get 2 items, like Infinity Edge plus Collector plus your Dorans, your runes and all that, maybe you have somewhere close to 200, between 150 and 200 bonus AD. So you're only losing like 30 damage at level 11 off of an ability that's going to be doing like 650 or something. So you're losing like 5% damage, maybe-ish, at level 11. So it's not really that much when you're already overkilling people by so much. And then the Yordle Snap Trap only matters once you start maxing out the trap. Again, the base damages are the same, it's just the scaling with the bonus AD. Now, that is quite a bit, going from 80% bonus AD down to 40, but she doesn't max the trap first, she maxes it second. So you're really only going to start to feel this once you get to those higher levels of trap, right? Once you get to like the, level 12, level 13, stuff like that, that's where you're really going to start, feeling this kind of difference. And again, once you get to like 2 or 3 items. But she's still going to be very dominant in lane. She does get a little bit better scaling with attack speed, but I still think you want to go for the heavy AD kind of builds. That's kind of a bait. And I still think she's going to be pretty good. Whereas other ADs, I mean, they're changing Corki around a little bit. His win rate's still pretty low. People are playing him kind of as a lethality type of champ with opportunity. I still don't think he's that great, but this certainly does help him out a little bit. Draven, they did nerf his Q in the micro patch last time. I think Draven's kind of a bait. He's a little bit overrated. We'll talk about that in a second, in my opinion. He can win, but there's a lot of hype around him because he was played at MSI, and I think he did okay in like some matches in MSI, but he's really hard for people to execute on. So basically, if you feed on Draven, then it's going to matter a little bit less. You lose fewer of your stacks, and you gain a little bit more gold for each stack of adoration. So he's just a little bit more stable now. So if you tend to be aggressive and lose your stacks early on, it's not going to completely gut you, but you're not going to be gaining as many stacks as you did before. So it's just kind of a safer option. I think it was 40 plus a little bit more before the nerfs. Yeah, there it is. 40 plus 2.5 per stack. But anyways, he's okay. Gangplank, Gnar, Hui, these don't matter. Hui is sometimes played as AD carry, quote unquote, as like an AP carry in the bot lane. I'm not really going to cover those types of champs. Sometimes you'll see like Karthus, Hui, historically Cassiopeia, Vlad, Ziggs, but they just aren't picked very often. I've heard they are, some of those types of champs are getting picked in pro, but right now in other regions, but I just would not recommend them most of the time. It depends on your team comp. You have to have someone who's playing an AD carry type of thing in another role to make that work, I think. You still want someone who can take down towers, take down Baron, take down tanks. And there are some champs that can do that, but it can really mess up your team comp if you run too much AP or if you don't have enough champions that can do that type of thing. So usually you have to have, or it's very optimal to have an AD carry. And there are a lot of AD carries that are really, really good. A lot of people consider this to be one of the most broken roles right now. Although I would say in solo queue, AD carry is the hardest to climb with, typically by default, just because it is so team reliant most of the time. But, so it probably should be a little bit on the strong side. The problem is pro play just kind of messes that up because of the high coordination. AD carry almost always ends up being strong in pro play, but usually if it's too strong, it'll get nerfed, and that'll make it weak in solo queue. But okay, Jinx, this is a complete joke. You lose like 2.5 AD at level 10. That's not going to move the needle that much. It's like 80 gold at level 10. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Karthus getting a couple of minor nerfs, not going to matter. Kha'Zix is a little bit stronger. I still don't think he's going to be that great. When assassins are good, that's typically bad news for AD carries, but I don't think there are a ton of assassins that are really popping off right now. I think it's mostly fighters from the top lane. Okay, Cassante getting a couple of nerfs. That's fine. Now, Lulu is getting some buffs. This did help her win rate a little bit. I've had some people come on the channel and talk about, well, it didn't really move the needle that much. It just took a couple of days. It takes a couple of days for the statistics to kind of settle in, for you to get a big sample size of data. You've got a bunch of people that just want to try her out just for the hell of it after the buff. So you're going to have people that are inexperienced on her. But it did move the needle on her. So now she's at like 52%. She's a little bit higher. I think I put her at tier 2 or 3. I think I put her tier 2 or 3 on my support tier list. So she's not like hard dominant, but she's okay. She's really matchup dependent. So if you do play champions like a Kog'Maw, very good with Jinx, Twitch, stuff like that, Lulu's going to be very good. So this does indirectly buff Lulu, Kog'Maw, Jinx, those auto-attacking champs a little bit, but it relies on your support actually picking the Lulu to get that buff and actually playing it decently and not chain feeding. So there's a lot of ifs there, but, if your support is hovering something like Lulu, she is going to be a bit better with things like Kog'Maw or Twitch than she used to be. So she doesn't buff you up in terms of your damage that much more, but you do get a higher knockup duration, and your cooldown on your ultimate is a little bit lower, so you can use it more often to protect people, which is nice. Master Yi's getting a couple of buffs, Mordekaiser, Nami. So Nami is getting a little bit more attack damage, ebb and flow. Mana's going down at later ranks. This isn't usually a problem because typically you'll have your support item, and you'll also, usually I think she'll still go for Mandate. So she's going to have a lot of mana regen. You're not going to be spamming it as much outside of the laning phase. So it's a nice quality of life, but it's not a huge deal. And then Tidal Wave, slowing people by 70% at all ranks, is a nice little buff. It does last for, I think it depends on how far the wave goes, but it can be up to 3 seconds. So that's a pretty massive slow. Obviously, this is good news for Lucian. There are a couple of other champs that she's pretty good with too. I think she's like okay with Jhin, okay with Twitch, that type of stuff. So she does offer a little bit more CC and kind of kill threat than some of the other enchanters. That bubble is pretty devastating if you land it. And she does a decent amount of damage early on with just like her E and her W and just the way that it bounces and all of that. So she's a good early game pressure support who kind of falls off a little bit more later. She doesn't have as much guaranteed power as like a Sona or a Soraka, but she is a bit more versatile as well. So she doesn't have as much reliance on the plus healing and shielding. She doesn't get as much scaling off of that stuff, but she does have the hard CC at the bubble. If you land it 1.5 seconds, can hit multiple targets. Very, very good follow-up CC if someone else can hold them still for you, like a Gen W or, you know, Vialt, something like that. That is pretty nice. The long range on the R can interrupt ultimates that are kind of long range pretty well, so can interrupt Jhin, Xerath, you know, that type of stuff. So that's going to help out. So mostly Lucian, but there's a couple other minor people that might help out a bit as well. Nasus doesn't matter. Pantheon changes I don't think matter for support. Samira, kind of like Jinx, they're tapping her AD growth. Who cares? You know, at level 10, they're like, oh, well, it's knocking off 10% of her AD. It's like, yeah, but most of her damage is going to come from her items later on in the game anyways. So, I mean, she's not a Trinity Force user. Hits to, like, baseline AD typically affect Trinity people more than others because Trinity Force is, the damage is based on your base AD, not your total AD or your bonus AD. So, this is 3 AD. You know, it's like 100 gold at level 10. It's not going to matter. It's like a third of a longsword. Okay. And then the Blade Whirl is a little bit less damage. Okay, you're usually not using this. I mean, you can use it offensively in someone's face, but usually you're blocking some kind of projectile or something. So a lot of times you're not even hitting anybody with this unless you're already up in their face. So again, this is like a nerf, but it's a very, very minor nerf. And then Inferno Trigger. Now this is pretty significant because this is total AD. Baseline damage is the same, but it's 5% of your total AD off. So I don't know how many times she fires on this, but just percentage-wise, if you have like 200 total AD, when this is going off, which is like 2 items and change, then you're going to be losing 10 damage per attack, right? But it's still going to be doing... let's see, 90, 115. So you're losing about 10%-ish, a little bit more as you get more items. Probably 5 to 10% in the mid to late game damage on your R. But your R does overkill people most of the time, especially with Collector. It just blows people out. Like, you don't see a lot of squishies, a lot of ADCs and stuff standing in an entire ult and, you know, not disappearing. So... It is a nerf. It is a nerf, but I still think she's extremely good. We'll talk about that in just a second. Singe, just kind of whatever. Not going to matter. Smolder. They are giving her some health, mostly quality of life. So they're giving her a little bit of health there, health regen, base attack damage. So like your level 1 attack damage, 3. Probably not going to matter. That's still pretty low, I think, compared to a lot of ADCs out there. She's still incredibly weak in the early game, or he is. I always... think Smolder's a she for some reason. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I technically identified as a he in the game text, lore, whatever. Okay. So passive dragon, she gets a little bit more damage on critical strikes. He still doesn't build a lot of crit. He'll get Essence Reaver, but I don't think he's going to be like an Infinity Edge type of champ. I think he's still going to go for like the Shojin type of build. So they're trying to nudge you to get more crit on him, but it just takes too long, and he just doesn't scale that well with it still, I don't think. And then the mana cost is down. I don't think mana was a big deal anyways, especially if you're getting Essence Reaver, which is one of his most popular items. And the critical strike scaling is up a little bit, but again, he's still not building that much crit. So they're trying to nudge you into getting crit, but it's still not that great on him. Okay. Because you need cooldown reduction. That's the biggest thing. And I don't think there are any crit items other than Essence Reaver that have cooldown reduction. And you need a lot of cooldown reduction because that's how you get your stacks, right? You have to kill minions with it, and you want the splash damage. You just want to clear waves. and you want to spam your little bubble thing at people and hit them to get stacks. It's just the name of the game with Smolder is getting to 225 stacks as fast as you possibly can, and you need cooldown reduction for that. And the only critical strike item with cooldown reduction is Essence Reaver. And they got rid of Navori, whatever, the old Navori, which was good, and that gave crit and cooldown reduction, but now they changed it, where it doesn't give crit anymore. So really, his only option for crit is going to be Essence Reaver. Unless, you know, he can go for Infinity Edge and get more scaling, but then he's not getting the stacks as fast. So it's, a lot of people would say it's not really worth it, that the stacks are more valuable than getting more baseline damage on your auto attacks off of crit. Okay, the Blackfire Torch is nerfed a little bit. That's good news for ADCs. Essence Reaver, minor. Well, I mean, 5 AD is definitely good, and they're lowering it by 100 gold. So, champs that use this, I still think, are on the weaker end right now. Your Ezreals, your Smolder, stuff like that. But this is a step in the right direction. Shield Bow. Now, this got changed, where people are getting it now a little bit more. It doesn't have the lifesteal on it anymore, but it does give you a way better shield. So, as a late item, like a 4th item, that shield is pretty big, especially on champions that get resets or have other lifesteal mechanics or, you know, things like that. So Samira in particular is probably going to like Immortal Shield Bow. And there might be a few other champs, Jinx, things like that will probably like it, where they just need a couple more seconds and then they can just really pop off and take over a fight if they don't get blown up immediately. So this will probably replace something like a GA as 4th item on a lot of champs, but it's still not going to be amazing early on. Infinity Edge, like we talked about, minor nerf, still incredibly strong. Knight's Vow got some nerf, so this kind of sucks. So it kind of hits the tank supports a little bit more. But the good news is for you as AD carry, they're still giving you the same protection. You're still getting the reliable 12% damage reduction. So I still think most tank supports will want this item. They're just going to have to be careful because they personally will be a little bit squishier. But it's still an incredibly powerful effect for protecting AD carries or other important people. Okay, Static Shiv. Now this is one that I feel like I haven't seen people doing it that much in game, but on paper this seems really like pretty strong. Like not like initial rework Static Shiv strong, like absurdly strong, but pretty good. Now it does not have crit on it though, so this is going to be on the champs that don't have crit or that don't really want to buy that much crit, but still want wave clear, still want to be able to scale. So it's a little bit weird because it's not, it's like a hybrid item. It doesn't really fit super well with like Kraken type, like the Kraken Gensus, or Kraken Hurricane. Like it's just sort of a standalone strange item. So it's on champs that have just like sort of weird builds, like Kaisa, Ashe, stuff like that. I think is where this is going to go. So it's not like super popular everywhere because it doesn't have crit, and it also doesn't have like a lot of really good like on hit interactions, but it's just a big stat stick. So for 2,800 gold, it's now got movement speed on it. They're just throwing 7% movement speed on there, and they're lowering the cost by 100%. So that movement speed I think is worth like 50 gold each, something like that. So that's 350 gold there. You're saving 100. That's 450. You're getting 5 attack damage. That's 175 gold. So that's like what was that, 575? And then attack speed is 30 now. They nerfed that last patch to where it went from like 25 gold per attack speed to 30. So you're getting 5 of those. That's another 150. That's like 700 gold ish extra value on this item, and they increase the spark damage to 120. So again, sort of your weird build champs that just care about these like stat break points and just want a little bit more wave clear might like this. So I don't think it's for everybody, but the 2 people in my mind that really jump out are Kaisa and Ashe. Might want this. Kaisa more so than Ashe, but I think it's an interesting item now that people could want in certain situations. Sarah to Dirk, if you're stacking it, got nerfed. I did the math on this. I really don't think it was worth it. I mean, obviously people were doing it. Probably, you know, challenger smart people were doing it. So I'm sure they had a reason. But if you just look at a lot of the main items like opportunity, collector, stuff like that, that people were rushing, Dirk, like just completing the item was better than stacking Dirks because you were only losing like maybe 3 lethality or something like that when you complete something like opportunity, but you were gaining the passive, right, which is just way stronger. So I don't know. I mean, let's just look at it real quick. So I mean, I guess the main thing is on 2 components. Maybe it's stronger, so it's a little bit better. So you don't have to buy the Rectix, right? But if you look at the full Serrated Dirk is 1,000 gold for 20 and 10 lethality, right? But like this thing is 2,700, but the completed item is 18 lethality, 55 attack damage. So you're only losing, if you had 2 Serrated Dirks, you're only losing 2 lethality off of that instead of just completing opportunity. But opportunity is also going to have 15 more AD. 15 AD is $525 gold. So just that AD difference right there is going to take you to 2550. So you only have to pay another 150 gold in value to purchase the full opportunity. And once you do that, then you're paying 150 gold for the 5% movement speed, which is worth 250, and you're getting both of the passives off of it. So it's like, yes, at exactly at 2,000 gold, this is better, right? Because I think most people would rather have a Serrated Dirk than a Rectrix. But I don't know. It just it seems very situational. Like, I guess super top end, maybe challenger, you need a very specific back timing, and you just keep getting Serrated Dirks or whatever. So it seems super specific to me, but it does let you just go for, I guess if you just went for like 3 Serrated Dirks, maybe that's the question, with 30 lethality and 60 attack damage for just 300 more gold. I guess I could kind of see it that way. You're getting 5 more AD, which is 175. So you're paying 125 gold for effectively 12 extra lethality. Okay, I guess if you get the 3 Serrated Dirks instead of opportunity, on paper, in terms of the raw stats, the raw lethality, AD, stuff like that, yes, it's probably better, right? So you are missing out on this stuff, but which just gives you a certain amount of lethality. Okay, I guess if you look at it that way, buying 3, I was looking at it like buying 2 and the opportunity cost that you could loot, well, literally opportunity, but I didn't mean to make that pun there, but the opportunity cost was not that great, but then I guess if you go extreme with it, 3 or 4 or whatever, then it does get better. Okay, but anyways, probably not going to matter most of the time. Zeal cut down. The Zeal nerf is kind of weird because a lot of the champions that were getting Zeal, I feel, were a little underpowered anyways. Like, the most OP thing to do was Infinity Edge plus Collector, I think, most of the time on a lot of these champs, so it's kind of odd that they're nerfing Zeal. Maybe they're just anticipating, because they're nerfing Collector and Infinity Edge, that the Zeal people will get stronger, so they might as well nerf it. Now, Zeal was extremely cost efficient for its price, but again, people were usually not rushing this, and a lot of those Zeal items, I think, were really underperforming on most champs. It was almost always better just to go heavier AD and just to ignore Zeal items on a lot of these top champs. But anyways, okay, let's get into the tier list. So, a little bit longer on the preamble than I expected, but that's fine. We'll get into it. Okay, so I still think Jinx is the top one. And remember, this is for Emerald through Bronze. It gets a little bit different once you go to like Diamond Plus, and certainly once you get into Pro, and then also once you kind of start moving down into Iron, the meta changes a little bit. Although I think that a lot of these things would still probably be good in Iron. Jinx is still going to be great in Iron. But, oh my gosh, come on. Oh, that was the wrong one. Okay. There we go. But Jinx is just a menace, and they just refuse to nerf her for whatever reason. She's been at 53+% the whole time. She's the most picked, third most picked ADC right now. And she's just kind of perfect with a lot of this meta. She can rush Infinity Edge. I think maybe they were anticipating that the nerf to lethality would hurt Jinx a lot because she needs a lot of auto attacks to deal most of her damage. She does have some damage from her spells. Like the W does pretty respectable damage. Obviously her R can do a lot of damage. But really, you know, when she's killing people, she's doing it with a lot of auto attacks. But the thing is, she still has fast auto attacks, right? Because of her Q, she can still, if she's trying to take down tanks or whatever, and usually you need a lot of auto attacking and crit or max HP type of damage, she still gets 130%, you know, because you're maxing Q first, damage against tanks. So she can still melt tanks even without lethal tempo. And the thing is, everybody else also lost lethal tempo. So the fact that she still has a lot of attack speed even after the loss of lethal tempo is, you know, I think she ends up a winner. And I think that's shown with the actual win rates. So still really good. Taking fleet, presence of mind does help out with your mana cost if you are just spamming rockets to push the wave, which she's one of the best wave clear champs early on as well. Presence of mind will help you out because usually you're going to be able to splash some onto the enemy and get some ticks. So that's really good. So it has a lot of wave clear, scales incredibly well, can have pretty decent poke if you're able to hit your Q to kind of finish people up. Nice range there. Good follow-up if your Leona lands something or your Nautilus or whatever lands a hook. You can hit them with a Q, keep them slowed. Or if you're in range, you get those chompers. Now these are pretty good too. 1.5 seconds root, and they stay on the ground forever. It's like for 5 seconds. So it's pretty good. If you chain it together, it can also give you a little bit of protection from people diving you. It's almost like a better Caitlyn trap for those kinds of purposes. Now it's on a much longer cooldown to start. It doesn't deal nearly as much as Caitlyn trap headshots, but as far as like protection goes, I think it's a little bit easier to land these than the Caitlyn traps just because they're going to be a lot bigger. So good follow-up CC, sort of reasonable protection, good tank shredding, really good extra range if you switch to the rockets, and it does splash damage. So if people are just kind of grouped up in team fights, then you're just going to totally annihilate people. And especially if you buy Hurricane, and I don't think that's super popular on her right now, but I believe the interaction still works. I'm kind of surprised more people aren't getting Hurricane. But basically the Hurricane bolts turn into mini rockets that can also splash. So if people are grouped up, the main person's going to get hit, then it's going to splash and hit the other two people, but the other two people are also going to get hit, and that's going to splash and hit the other two people. So it's basically 9 hits if they're grouped up. Now, the rockets don't do as much as a main damage, but they increase them in a way that I think is beneficial for Jinx. So it used to be just 30 on hit damage, but they gave it 15 extra physical damage on it. And that physical damage can crit. The on-hit couldn't crit. So it does 55% damage on each person that's splashed with the rockets, and it can crit, and it's modified by Infinity Edge. So that's a lot of damage. So instead of doing 30 damage per, if you have 200 AD off of like 2 items and some change, I guess you're not, if you're getting Runins, you're not going to have that much AD. Let's just say like 150 off of Infinity Edge, Dorans, and like runes, and just leveling up and whatever. Then it's going to be doing, you know, 75 damage or so for each one of these, and then that can also crit and end up doing like 150 and whatever. So it's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage, trust me, and it's even better wave clear than you already have. So again, I'm a little surprised. I think a lot of it is that it just doesn't have any AD on it anymore. And I'm really shocked that people prefer Phantom Dancer, though. I mean, it does have more attack speed. That does matter. I mean, 20% attack speed is a thing. You do get more movement speed as well. But man, those rockets with Jinx splashing in team fights is really strong. But either way, all of these items have pretty good win rates. I do feel like Rapid Fire Cannon is a bit of a bait. It's the lowest attack speed item. You do get the range, which is nice, but you're giving up 25% attack speed for that and that extra 5% move speed that you would get off a Phantom Dancer. So now Rapid Fire Cannon does have that 60 bonus damage on your first hit too, which is nice, but now it looks like Static Shiv actually has one of the highest win rates, but off of single item. But I just don't think it's going to be as good as Infinity Edge. Just do Infinity Edge, guys. Trust me, it scales. I think it's just way better than Kraken in terms of scaling. A lot of people are still going Kraken on her. I mean, that is good with your Gatling gun. That is good for taking down Baron and taking down towers. So it's not like the worst item in the world, but I feel like Infinity Edge just scales way better later on into the game. But if you do want to go something like, I guess, Kraken, Phantom, and then Infinity Edge later, I guess there's an argument for that as well. I'm not a Jinx main. I don't know for sure. But either way, still an incredibly powerful champion right now. Lots of different item builds. And again, she just kind of does it all. She has an incredibly powerful reset that will take over team fights. She wave clears really well. She team fights really well. She takes down tanks. She takes down towers, barons. I mean, really the only thing is that she doesn't have a lot of protection. So you do kind of rely on your AD carry to peel for you. You can, land your zap and sort of get away. You can use your chompers to help a little bit. But she's probably the champ that has less getaway options than most of the other champs on this list. So you do have to be careful, but if you have that backline protection, you can just, completely delete everybody in fights. Okay, Caitlyn. So I had thought that Caitlyn was a little overrated, and statistically, that's probably true. She's only at like a 52% win rate, but I think you have to kind of keep the context in mind. A lot of people, especially at Emerald Minus, don't play Caitlyn correctly, and she still has a 52% win rate. So what do I mean by that? The main thing with Caitlyn is you really need to be leveraging her abilities to do a lot of damage, and people just don't do that often. They just see her as just an auto-attacking champ. They will walk up and maybe auto-attack people in lane. A lot of people just farm at max range on Caitlyn that I see. They aren't actively pressuring up and trying to land those auto attacks, which is really where she excels in the early game. But the big thing about Caitlyn is trap usage, and a lot of people just do not use this correctly. Like, they will not put a trap at their feet, if they're about to get dove in a team fight. That can be, life or death. Using those traps. A lot of people will use it to squeeze people at towers, but just using these traps a lot more aggressively to create zones of control. People will combo them with CC a lot, which is good, but often if someone steps on a trap, you'll just see one headshot and that's it. Really, you got to get more than that, right? Ideally, you're getting a headshot net backwards, and then while you're netting backwards, you queue up your Q so that your Q fires while you're netting backwards, and then you headshot again after your net lands. So you should be able to land at least 2 headshots whenever someone steps on a trap, if you're playing up and you're pressuring people enough. But almost nobody ever does that. Everybody, it's typically they'll be playing so far back, and then they'll just get one headshot in. It needs to be at least a Q plus a headshot, right? Because the Q does max range or max damage even if it goes through minions if they've triggered a trap. So keep that in mind. So always make sure you're at least throwing a Q plus the headshot. Don't just settle for a headshot unless they're literally at max range, like 1300 or whatever. You need to be playing up and pressuring, trying to go for those, net combos if you can, and at least getting a Q plus a headshot. But she's really, really strong, and a lot of people are just skipping the attack speed items, like you'll see with a lot of these champs, and they're just going for Collector, then Infinity Edge, and then you just completely melt people. Because she really is more of a caster AD type of champ. Even though she does auto attack, it's really just her ability to burst off of the headshots, the Qs, and that's what's deleting people. And then, the scaling on the headshot is just so crazy with AD, and it also scales with crit. And whenever you get one of these bonus headshots, as they call it, like with the net or the trap, it doesn't affect your normal headshot count. And so after you land your, snap trap headshot, a lot of times you might have another headshot, either instantly or within 1 or 2 auto attacks. So just really, really heavy burst, completely deleting people. Now, this build is a little bit weaker against tanks, but people aren't playing a ton of tanks right now, and it can still deal quite a lot of respectable damage if you just keep kiting, and the tank walks over a trap, or you go with a net or whatever. You can still delete people, so very good. Collector, obviously really nice with her ultimate as well, which does a lot of damage, scales off of the lethality of Collector. Now, I don't think the ult scales off of crit, but the extra collection there, the death passive, is really nice. And she has a ton of range on that ult too. It's like halfway up the river. So I don't see a lot of Caitlyn's doing this in my game, but they probably should be doing it more. You could very easily, if you have the enemy pushed in and there's a fight going on mid lane or in the jungle or whatever, just start walking over there and ult, get either the kill or the assist, then walk back to lane. Boom, easy. So you can actually exert a decent amount of map pressure early on with the Caitlyn if you just do a little half roam once you get priority in your lane, which should be almost every lane that you're getting the priority. So it's a really strong champ. So yeah, probably Collector than Infinity Edge. You can also go Infinity Edge first, and that actually has a higher win rate. I feel like the rapid fire cannon is a bait. It's always talk about because the attack speed, it has no AD on it, low attack speed. It is a nice quality of life. You do get more range to hit people, which is cool, but you're giving up a lot of damage for that perk. So I would just skip it and either go for Lord Dom's or Yuntal Arrows third, and then whichever one you didn't get as fourth. And then after that, probably either Bloodthirster or Shield Bow, whatever you need. So, Rapid Fire doesn't have like the worst win rate in the world, right? Like third, it's competitive. Like it's right there with the Yuntal Arrows. It's a little bit higher than Infinity Edge if for some reason you're waiting for Infinity Edge third. It's not horrible, right? It's in the ballpark, but it depends on the situation. If it's really spooky to walk up within Caitlyn's 650 range, you gotta have 800 range to be able to do anything in a fight. Okay. And if you're already overkilling squishies anyways, and you just need more range, sure. But I would highly recommend that you at least try Collector than Infinity Edge first, and then if they don't have squishies, if you're already killing them, then maybe Rapid Fire just for the quality of life. Okay. So Caitlyn's still really good. Not the highest win rate. There are some higher win rate ADCs out there, but if you play her reasonably well, I think she can take over a game. She's extremely oppressive in the early game, and they did just buff early game Tower Gold too. So that's another win to Caitlyn. They nerfed the Tower Gold plates a while ago, but they just gave back more on first tower overall. And just when you have prio, that's just what you want to be doing in solo queue. Whenever you have them pushed in, you're getting plates, they're missing CS, you're getting pressure on towers, your support can go ward, your support can deny their vision for wards. You can roam if you want, you get preferable back timings. That's just really about a lot of what League of Legends is lane priority, pressure, and doing something with that pressure. And there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can just harass them and beat them down under tower. So Caitlyn's one of the best at pressuring early. A lot of these champions up here are very good at pressuring early. And yeah, she just abuses it more than almost anybody. Okay, Samira. So Samira's kind of an oddball because she doesn't have a ton of pressure in the early game. She doesn't have a lot of wave clear in the early game, but her damage and just her snowball potential is absolutely just through the roof off these things. So if you just get 1 or 2 kills, and you have some kind of engaged support that'll go in and help you get more kills, you really can take over. Now her win rate, not amazing, but it's only like 50%. But again, she's very high risk, high reward because she doesn't care as much about attack speed. Most of her damage is going to come from spamming her Q, and she's just trying to get her passive stacked up. And then once she gets that stacked up so she can just dive in and go for the ultimate, just totally deletes people. And it's really hard to interact with her if she has hands because she can use her W to dodge a bunch of stuff. Which is pretty nice. That gap close. This thing, I don't know what the range is on this. I'm going to look it up because she kept dashing when I was playing against her, and it just felt like it was so far with the E. Like she would just flash E and it felt like it was over 1,000 range. The radius is 325. Oh, no, that's not it. That's this one. Okay, so it's... What? Dash distance is 650, but technically it's saying it hits them at 800. This is so confusing. Okay, so you can cast it on people at 600, but then you dash and hit them up to 800? Okay. So it's within a fixed distance, though. So she still dashes even if they get outside of that range. I don't know. This is all, like, really confusing. But it feels very far. So she has this crazy, like, dash. And then you get a cooldown reduction if you kill somebody. So you can dash in, kill them, and then potentially dash out. Now... you do have to dash towards an enemy. You can't dash towards allies anymore. She used to have that, but it was just too strong. So they had to take that out. So you can cast your ultimate also and your Q while you're in the middle of the dash. So you're dashing towards them. You've already got the Q going, and then you can auto attack when you land. So there's a lot of like sort of weird little intricate combos you can do with her. A lot of text. Well, not a lot, I guess, compared to some champions out there. But, you know, there's just a lot of things you can do. She's very aggressive. If you play her right, you can negate a lot of enemy engage or a lot of enemy CC with the W. And you just delete people, especially if they have a lot of melees. You can get in there, and a lot of people are playing fighters right now. And if they don't shut her up while she ults, it just deletes. Like, it's just going to delete everybody. It's so much damage. Her ultimate scales off of crit, and it scales off of AD, and it just checks so often that it's very likely that she's going to get those collector ticks, and she's going to collect all that money and just continue to hyperscale. So, incredibly strong champion, really difficult to deal with. If she gets ahead, she can be bullied in lane, so if she doesn't have an engaged champ with her, and the enemy has like double range, and they just push you and keep you under tower, it is kind of a problem. Now, she can last hit sort of well under tower with her Q to help her out. It is on a pretty low cooldown. But nevertheless, she, you know, wants to be diving, wants to be getting those kills, and just does a ton of damage if she gets in there. So, a little bit riskier. You know, I wouldn't argue if someone wanted to put her down in tier 2. If they, you know, feel like it's too skill intensive or too matchup reliant to get ahead with her, I could definitely see that. But I've had 2 games where she popped off for like 15, 20 kills. Now, one game we did actually win the game. We were down 3 inhibitors, and they had a Samira that was like 15 plus kills. And we were just able to get on her, lock her down, and blow her up late game. And then they didn't have anyone else on their team that could really do that much. But another game, it was just like no chance. She had like 15 kills again and just completely deleted everybody. So just really, really difficult champion to deal with. Okay, and then Ashe. Now, Ashe is kind of the oddball one here, and I will pick it up a little bit, so I don't want this video to be too long. But Ashe is one where she's actually not building the crit items. Ashe can build crit. It is a little bit odd, because her actual arrows do not crit, but she gets extra AD. It like converts the crit over to AD, and I'm not sure about the exact conversion ratio. it used to be decent enough where she would actually get crit, but I think in modern times she really has just been skipping crit, definitely on the newest patch. She gets like a critical slow. Apply frost, so she has this permanent frost, everybody knows that. Basic attacks against enemies with frost. So if you've already attacked them once, then your next attacks are going to do 120% damage, and then it's modified by 75% of your critical strike chance. So I don't know the exact math on that, but yeah, if you have 50% chance to crit, then it's going to be giving you, you know, whatever that number is, 35% extra damage. So I don't think that's advantageous. Now you do get 40% extra off of Infinity Edge. So that would be doing 115% of your critical strike damage. So just getting something like Infinity Edge may be worth. So her critical strikes don't deal any extra damage, but they double the strength. So you get a much more brutal slow if you land it. So I don't think you want to be getting a lot of crit with her. It sounds like you're losing value if you're buying crit. Like, it does buff up her basic attacks, but it sounds like it's not super advantageous. But maybe Infinity Edge, because that is a pretty big bonus. If that's a flat 40%, that's not in parentheses. You never know if they coded this correctly on here or put down the equation correctly. But if it really does go from 75% to 40%, not 40% of the 75, but just 40% flat, maybe it's worth it. But most people are skipping crit. But she has a lot of utility. She has the innate slow. She gets a decent amount of extra attack speed. So she can get up to 55% attack speed there, which is okay. It's not crazy. And then once you get your flurry going, then your total damage is 125%. Now remember, it goes to 120% right here. Then you get 125% of that. So those basic attacks are hitting pretty hard. And you can reset your auto attack with the Q as well. A lot of people are maxing the W, which gives you the 100% of your total AD. So that's pretty good poke damage. And it applying a critical slow. So has a pretty big slow on it. And it's going to go ahead and put that frost on them, so it's your first auto attack is automatically going to have that extra 20% damage too. So pretty good poke, pretty good utility, nice for kiting, good for chasing people down. She's got the hawk shot to chase the jungler, or to like track the jungler, which isn't a massive deal in solo queue. So a lot of people just don't use that information super well, but it is nice. And then of course you've got the enchanted crystal arrow. So she's one of the few ADCs that really brings like a super brutal piece of CC. Jhin has a nice piece of CC too with his W, but enchanted crystal arrow, obviously one of the best CCs in the game if it lands. Really, really good. So she's got nice damage. She has nice range too. So she's the second highest, I think, baseline range ADC. I think it's 625, isn't it? 600. Okay, so there might be people that are higher these days, but she's up there. She's one of the higher ranged ADCs. So yeah, a lot of people are using the new Kraken on her. You get the extra damage on hit. You get the extra movement speed, which is good for kiting. You know, she doesn't care about the crit as much. It's kind of a lighter attack damage item, but it does have the extra attack speed. But it's mostly that extra physical damage. The fact that they're slowed means that, you know, you're going to be able to probably guarantee those longer fights, those longer engagements if you want it. Which is nice. And then the Phantom Dancer, just getting a lot more attacks. Good combo with Kraken, allows you even more kiting, so you're going to get up to 20% extra movement speed off of that, which is handy. And then it looks like people are going for the Infinity Edge third item, which, you know, does play into your basic attacks, doing a lot more damage when you land those. So I think she's good. Now, some people have been getting Triforce as well. It looks like that is a bit more popular, which is a bit of an odd choice when you first look at it. It does have like good attack damage, good attacks, like okay attack speed, a little bit lower than something like the Phantom Dancer, but you do get health, which is really nice, so you can't get blown up super fast by stuff. And the ability haste is good, right? Because you've got such a really good engage tool with your ultimate, and it's going to allow you to spam your W more, and you get the 200% base physical damage. So if you land your W on somebody, that's already going to have the frost on them, and then your next attack is going to do, you know, the additional 200% damage. Now, I don't know if that 200% damage is modified by the frost, by either one of her passives. That's something I hadn't thought about before. Traditionally, I don't think... Well, Trinity is modified by, like, Camille. I know that's a big deal. Like, Camille's Q. I don't know if it's modified by, like, Ezreal's Q. So there are some interactions with that. This says basic attacks against enemies with frost are modified to deal 120% damage. Ruin's Hurricane will not deal additional damage on crit. Okay. So I don't know. I'd have to watch like an Ashe guide, like a really high level guide. But if Trinity is, if that damage is modified, the 200% then gets another 120% damage on top of that. And especially if it gets the extra, I'm getting lost in the sauce here. Getting tired. If it's getting modified by Ashe's stuff, then it feels like it's oh, this too with the Fury. No, that's each arrow. Okay, so that almost certainly is not going to affect it, right? That's where you throw out those 3 arrows. But this one says that the attack itself is modified. Basic attacks. So I don't know. So if it does, that's really good. Even if it doesn't, though, that's still probably pretty good, because now you're getting 200% of your base physical damage, and you're getting the frost thing, and you're potentially doing your arrows. It's just a good kind of jack of all trades. So it looks a little weird, but especially if you're going for the W max, which a lot of people do, you can spam that fairly often. You also get 20 extra movement speed, which is about the equivalent of I'm trying to think how many times. Let's see if she has like 330 base. About 6% movement speed or so. So it's similar to some of these other items. Not Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer is faster, but it's similar to the other ones. And she doesn't really care about that crit as much on something like Phantom Dancer. And that's probably why people prefer Trinity on her, because you'd rather just have these extra quality of life things. So that's interesting. Terminus is a little weird because, I don't know. I mean, it does do extra on hit. You do attack fairly quickly, but you don't get extra movement speed. You don't do magic damage, so the magic pen, I mean, you don't do much magic damage. Your R can do some magic damage, but I don't know. I'd probably rather just have Infinity Edge on her at that point. But yeah, so she's got kind of a weird item path, but actually does quite a lot of damage now. Ashe used to not do very much damage. That was kind of her thing, was she had good utility but did lower damage. But she's actually hitting pretty hard. Like, not up front in the same way that someone like a Jhin or a Samira is, but it's just so hard to get away from her. She chains together CC really well with a lot of other AD carries out there. And she just does a lot of sustained damage with Kraken and all these other modifiers that she has in her kit. She's got the slow, she's got a lot of utility. So she is vulnerable. If someone lands a hook on her or some other piece of hard CC, she has, you know, no dashes. But as far as being able to kite people out, especially once you start getting these movement speed items, she's pretty good. And then Jhin, Jin's just really good. It's very similar to a lot of the other champs we've talked about. He's going to be an Infinity Edge, Collector, Abuser. And Jhin has never really liked getting attack speed items, so he loves to see those attack speed items nerfed. Because that means all his competition is getting nerfed. And he just uses Collector so well because he can trigger it off of his ultimate to really secure those kills on the low targets that might otherwise skate away with just a little bit of health. He loves lethality and he loves ADC because, again, his baseline abilities do pretty good damage with the grenade, the W, traps, his ultimate. All of those, you know, benefit pretty heavily from AD and lethality. And his fourth shot just hits so hard. Like, it does crit, and it's additional crit that's, you know, modified by lower health targets. Now it'll be interesting to see this too. Is that extra crit damage on his fourth shot, is that modified by Infinity Edge? So does he do like 40% extra on that or not? I would assume probably not, but critical strikes grant Jhin, so he gets extra movement speed whenever he crits. Everybody knows that, so he really, really, really likes crit. Final round, uncancelable windup, always crits, and deals bonus physical damage equal to this amount. Okay, wait. The penalty to Jin's critical damage also reduces the base damage 100 plus 75 times 0.86 rather than 100 plus 75 times 0.86. Wait, he does less damage on crits? Gains bonus attack damage equal to 4 to 44%. Plus, okay, so he gains bonus AD based on how much crit you have, and to a lesser extent attack speed. Like, attack speed does scale a little bit with him, but it's not at a very good rate. Oh, here we go. Can critically strike. These attacks have slightly increased missile speed, but only deal 150 plus 30. Okay, so he does do less on crits. I didn't realize that. But the I don't know if the fourth shot cannot be canceled. Bonus attack speed. I'm not sure. But look, the main point is he does a lot of damage. Like, especially once he gets that Infinity Edge with that fourth shot, he'll just completely delete people. So Collector, Infinity Edge. You can do Rapid Fire Cannon as well. Again, that's a quality of life thing. Now, that's a very good quality of life thing because his fourth shot hits extremely hard. So when you've got your fourth shot queued up off a wave and you've got that rapid fire, you know, you can sneak up on people and get those hits when they're not expecting it. You can do a lot of damage. His W is also really underrated. I think it's a root, and it's like 1.5 seconds at level 1. It's either 1.25 or 1, and I think it scales up to 2, and I think it's the ability to max second. So a 2-second CC on an 80 carry that has a range of like 1500. Now it is a very slender hitbox, but a lot of damage, a lot of CC, chains together really well with a lot of other tanks. And historically, he does have a problem breaking tanks because he doesn't have a lot of attack speed to tear through them. But you can just kite around them, right? Especially if you've got a support, like one of the really popular tanks right now, that can just kind of lock people up and just keep them contained. And you just get to dance around them with Boots of Swiftness and just constantly crit them and just run around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like, it's very hard to run him down unless... again, you've got a lot of gap closers and a lot of dashes, but usually he can play around those. You got to use those traps well too if you're playing him. Very similar to someone like Caitlyn, you want to make sure you're putting traps down near your feet so you can kite around any divers that are coming at you when a fight's about to start. I think a lot of people forget that. You can use the traps to help you control bushes a little bit around objectives. So just make sure you're using those traps wisely. They do a decent amount of damage. If someone steps on a trap, you hit them with a W, and then they end up having the trap blow up on them. It's quite a lot of damage. So Jhin, probably just, again, go for Collector, Infinity Edge, and then your call after that. Rapid Fire Cannon for sort of quality of life. LDR for... I don't know the math on the new LDR versus Yuntao Wild Arrows at different armor breakpoints. Someone like Freak might have that in a chart for you. But I think a lot of people are sleeping on Yuntao. But I think it's potentially pretty good. Yeah, it has the highest win rate, third item. I've been preaching about this item for a while, especially after you have Infinity Edge. It just does a lot of damage. But, I mean, LDR has less attack damage on it, but it has a lot of armor pin. So at a certain point, LDR is going to be better. Probably at almost certainly at 100 armor or higher on a target, LDR is going to be better. But if it's a squishy, like 50 armor targets, Yuntao is probably better. But again, I just don't know the math on it. We're almost out of time, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it. But rapid fire, you know, I say it's a bait on most champs. On Jhin, it's probably most useful on Jhin than almost anybody else. Maybe Caitlyn because of her. If you get a headshot queued up with rapid fire, that's also really strong. But just obviously anyone who's going to be able to land a really powerful single shot. So you're going to get the fourth shot with Jhin, and that can also set up to land your W on somebody and then start ulting them. But yeah, really powerful champ, much like the others. I'll run through these last few a little bit faster. So I think if you want to win most of the time in most situations, I would play one of those top 5 champions. I think that they are definitely a step up from the ones that are lower. Samira, again, is a little riskier. If you want to put her below that, that's fine. But definitely Jinx, Caitlyn, Ashe, Jhin feel like the big 4 right now, with Samira being sort of the wild card depending on how fed you get with her. Miss Fortune, still going to be really strong. A lot of people are sleeping on her. She scales really well with crit. I don't know why people insist on doing Ghost Blade on her still. I know like the movement speed feels good and you want the lethality and everything, but just kick it off with Collector. Like, it's incredibly good, right? Like, your ultimate can trigger Collector really well. Okay, people have switched over to good build and finally gotten off Ghost Blade. Thank God, I think, because this item is just, after the nerfs, it's just not good on ADCs anymore. People are just living in the past. Opportunity does have a high win rate, but her ult can crit. I think people don't realize that. Like, it's one of the few ultimates that actually scales with crit. So her little ulti, each one of those little bullets can crit. So yeah, I think just play her like one of these casters. Collector, Infinity Edge, Lord Doms, you're good to go. Now, Yuntao Wild Arrows does not work off of the ultimate though, so she's going to be someone that doesn't benefit as much off of that. And it has really high base damage, so Lord Dominic's is going to be really strong with that as well. There is an argument for something like a Sorrel does. It doesn't have crit, but being able to keep them slow in your ultimate is obviously kind of nice. Although they did change that to where now they have to be under 50% to get that slow. But either way, she has pretty good poke in the laning phase, really good sort of setup for your engaged supports with your E, kind of just point click. It's not, you know, as good as like a Jhin W or them stepping on a Caitlyn trap or a Jinx trap or whatever, but it's still a nice slow. She does reasonable damage. She's very fast. You're going to be able to get really good back timings. You're going to be able to rotate to different situations. You're going to be able to potentially run away if you see a gank coming in. So she's got that speed going for her. And then just the ultimate just deletes people. If you have a team fight comp, you have one or two sort of engaged champs. You know, you got a Vi, you got a Nautilus, a Leona, or whatever. They just go in, start the fight. You just press R and people disappear. It's really long range. It's really easy to do. It's incredibly strong. So she's very reliable, especially if you don't play ADC a lot and you're getting autofilled or you're just trying to, you know, want to try something out with some friends. I highly recommend Miss Fortune, especially for newer players, because you don't even have to worry about positioning and auto attacking most of the time. You just press R in a team fight and, you know, good things are going to happen for your team. Okay, Lucian, I'm not really sure what his build is these days. I feel like it probably should be crit, although I sense people might be trying Kraken with him. Lucian just requires a lot of skill, I think, to execute correctly. Okay, yeah, people are switching over to the crit. It's taken people some time to get off of these other items, but you know, he can do a lot of damage in the early game. He's got all these different combos. His ultimate can do quite a bit of damage, zone people off, poke people. So, you know, he's good. There hasn't been a lot that's changed in terms of how he's played other than people building the crit. So just for the sake of time, we'll move faster. Not that much more sort of interesting going on there. Nami did get a buff. That's good for Lucian. If you're aggressive, if you know when to dash in and you're not going to feed and you can get good combos with him, that's great. But he is a lower range ADC, so it is a little bit harder to position correctly on him, and it's very easily to get baited into dashing forward. I know if I ever see a Lucian and I'm playing an engaged champ, he dashes forward, he's probably going to die. Like, you have to pick the right time to do it, because again, it's that short range, so he really gets punished hard if he mispositions and uses that cooldown. Okay, Twitch. Now, Twitch could go in S tier. I could see an argument for that. He's kind of like Samira, where if you get really fed, he's almost impossible to deal with in solo queue. Really obnoxious because, of course, he's got that invisibility. Can roam around the map. Does a lot of damage, even with crit. Hopefully people have switched over that. I haven't played against many Twitches recently. Hopefully people are off of the Blade of the Ruined King stuff. Yes. It's taking some time. No, actually they're not. A lot of people are still getting it. Now, single item, I don't know. It does have a high win rate on Blade, but I still feel like going for either Collector or Infinity Edge is probably going to be better. I almost certainly feel like it's going to scale better. I mean, Collector just seems so good on him because your poison is going to keep ticking on him even after you E. And there's so many situations where people walk away with just like less than 5% HP after the poison ticks. But, you know, with Collector, you're going to be able to finish him off of those poison ticks. And your E is physical damage if you have mostly AD. His ultimate does scale off of crit. All of those bolts can crit. So that's really strong. Now, one thing historically about Twitch is the way that his ultimate is coded. You do reduced damage after you auto attack people through things. So the more targets that you're hitting, the more damage that it does, or the less damage that it does, including minions. So you do not want to open up and fire through a minion wave with your ultimate. You're going to be doing, it used to be even less damage than just a normal auto attack. It used to actually reduce your damage if you ulted, which was kind of dumb. So I think they reduced that a little bit, the penalty a little bit on the R, but nevertheless, do not fire through a minion wave. However, if you're firing through traffic, Blade of the Ruined King still deals full damage. So this is kind of like the idiot-proof version of Twitch, just to put it in kind of, I don't know, probably terms that are too mean. But this is the foolproof version of how to ult with Twitch, is you get Blade of the Ruined King, and you're still dealing full damage with that. Your normal attacks are getting modified, but your Blade is still doing a lot. Versus if you go Infinity Edge or Collector, those crits on people, if you're firing through the minion wave, are going to do a lot less damage. They're not going to be doing full damage. So that might be why people are still running with Blade of the Ruined King or Kraken, is because that's, you know, it does allow you a little more versatility to open up through minion waves if you want to. I think people like it for the chase potential as well. People just really love opening up at like 100 range with Twitch and just trying to chase people down even through flash. Most of the time, if you just open up at like 700 or something, it's still going to be enough to probably kill them, and it's a lot safer. But anyways, good scaling, I think, is going to be Collector or Infinity Edge. Hurricane is still really good. Remember that this does scale better with crit than it used to for the reasons I talked about earlier with Jinx. And it does put a lot of extra poison on people, so it's kind of a core item on Twitch. You really want Hurricane. I feel like it should be a core item on Jinx too, because of those rocket interactions, but whatever. And then, you know, just get something third, either Infinity Edge if you didn't get it earlier for some reason, or Lord Doms. You can do Yuntao Wild Arrows too. That is going to stack a bleed on people, which is very handy, especially if you've got Collector and your poison ticking. This is just more things that are going to tick on him over time. And this also is not going to be, the crit modifier on that is not going to be modified by going through multiple targets. So everybody's going to be taking the full 35% bleed off of a crit on there, because it doesn't check your actual crit damage. It just tries to see, was there a crit in there somewhere or not. That actually makes me think that'd be incredibly powerful with Hurricane, because if the Hurricane bolts crit, it's going to be doing full Yuntao damage, because it doesn't check your crit damage. It checks what your total AD is if you crit, and then puts that bleed on him. So that sounds really good to me. Something like either Collector or Infinity Edge, plus Hurricanes, plus Yuntao, plus whatever you didn't get, 4th item. But yeah, really strong there. And then Aphelios would be the last one that I mentioned. I know this has been a super long video. He has a really low win rate, so I know it's probably a little controversial. Why do I have him up here and I have other stuff with, you know, higher win rates a little bit lower? It's sort of like what I talked about with Samira and Twitch, in that he's just kind of high risk, high reward. If you play him correctly, if you know how to rotate the guns, if you fight on the right guns, he still does a lot of damage. And I think the Collector Infinity Edge is a fine build with him. He doesn't need that much attack speed to really pop off, especially if he's got things like red, white gun, you know, gets in there and fights. And I'm not familiar with all of his scaling or all of the different you know aspects of him, but I've seen him pop off and do a lot of damage in games. So he does need a little bit more protection. He's kind of like a Jinx, where he doesn't have a lot of escapes. He doesn't have a lot of peel or kiting potential with most of his guns. There are some. Obviously, purple can help him out a little bit. I think he gets some movement speed with the red gun. So he does have some options, but it's a lot more limited than some other champs. So you really want him with somebody that can protect him in the laning phase. But he's, you know, the million IQ type of champion. He's been nerfed a lot because of pro play. So, you know, play him at your own peril. But I think if you do master him, if you do play him at a high level, he's probably deserving of at least A tier. I wouldn't argue if someone wanted to bump him down to tier 3. But I think that he does have a lot of potential. There's just a lot of people don't know how to play him well. And that's pretty much it. A couple of the other notable ones. Draven, mentioned before, is kind of a bait champion in my opinion. He's really hard to play. He's mostly single target. Yes, he can delete single targets really, really easily. He can snowball well, but it's just very hard to get a ton of use value out of him in team fights. Unless you, again, are really far ahead. But if you do scale with him, if you do snowball, he gets a lot of gold. He can take over games. So he's still decent, but he just doesn't have as much utility. And really a big thing about him is he's so short-ranged that it can be kind of rough on him. Tristana can be good, but short range early on, it's very hard to manage your CS with her. She can push, but if you're getting pushed in, you know, by champions like Caitlyn, Jinx, Jhin, all of those are probably going to push better than you do. It's really, really hard to CS under tower with Trist because you can't control the explosions. So that's difficult, but if you do get ahead, you can snowball really hard with her. I think the nerf to Hail Blades was pretty rough on her in the early game. So, yes, if you get to later in the game, she does get nice range. She does have a really good attack speed steroid with her Q. But early game, you can get bullied, and it is going to be rough. You can do the bullying. If you're the one that has the engaged champ, you get to jump in and, you know, get your explosive resets and stuff like that. That can be good. And she does take towers really well. So you were seeing her played in pro some during MSI because she does scale very well with levels. She gets the extra range. Almost all of her abilities are really good. So she's okay, but I think she's a bit riskier. Vayne, again, short range, does scale very well. You were seeing her played at MSI, mostly in the top lane. One of the best side lane ADCs. You know, kills tanks, very mobile. But very auto attack reliant. Terrible at wave clear notoriously. Doesn't have a lot of like trading potential in lane. You have to land 3 auto attacks usually to get a good trade in. So I just think she's going to get bullied by a lot of these other champs, but she could still do well. And then Kai'Sa's okay. I mean, I'd have to see where the static Shiv goes. I know some people still like to play her. She still has a nice kit. Like, the ultimate is good. She's got pretty good wave clear early on with her Q. She is short range. But I still feel like the items just don't favor her very well. She doesn't like crit very much. She typically is just going for like a Kraken, you know, Phantom, Navori type of build. I don't know. I just think that a lot of the on-hit champs that do that type of stuff aren't that great. Ashe is the exception, but Ashe is very long range, has a slow, has the arrow, has a lot of utility. Kai'Sa, if you have the right kind of comp, if you just really want to dive on the backline and assassinate, she can be good. I think she was way better at that with the AP builds. Now, I think it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, oh, let me jump on their backline and see if I can get off 10 auto attacks, you know, to kill their AD carry really quickly. Before, it was, you know, hit them with your W, ult, you know, Q, and then W again to kill them. And they just, like, popped, right, with the AP build. But now, it's not happening as much. Varus can be okay. Sort of similar to Ashe. He does have the ultimate for good control. He doesn't have the slow on every auto attack, but he is probably better with the on-hit variant right now. I would just rather play Ashe than Varus most of the time. But anyways, okay, that's it for this video. It's a lot longer than I expected it would be, but and there's lots more that I could say, but I'll go ahead and cut it off. So that's it. Thank you very much. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, and have a good day. See everybody next time. Be sure to like and subscribe.